Hello. In the first draft of this video, I said that most people think healing a hernia is complicated, but actually most people think healing a hernia is impossible. So today I want to try and simplify this and explain how I thought about my inguinal hernia and how that helped me come up with strategies to heal it. Just so you know, it's been well over a year since I've had any symptoms of my inguinal hernia, and so hopefully by sharing this kind of knowledge, I'll help you do the same thing. So I'm going to break this down and try to simplify this into two major factors. You have the size of your hernia and you have the amount of internal pressure. And you can imagine that at a very low internal pressure, you don't actually have hernia. And then there's some amount of internal pressure that that the hernia pops out, some kind of threshold, and then as the internal pressure rises, obviously the size might change. Now, let's just draw a quick picture. So you have your intestines, and they are putting an external pressure onto your abdominal wall. And I'm just going to leave a little gap here to represent the inguinal canal. And so, as I said, you can imagine that there's some kind of threshold that the tissue has, and if the pressure on the abdominal wall gets too large, your hernia pops out. Now, how does this help us with healing an inguinal hernia? Well, there's a couple of strategies about how we stay, how the hernia doesn't stay out. One strategy is you stay in this region here, where the internal pressure is low, and so the hernia just stays in. Okay, so how could we reduce the internal pressure? This could be a few things. For example, you might be causing inflammation or bloating in your guts. And so maybe you want to start cutting down various foods that are causing the problem. Maybe you're eating large meals. And so you can imagine if you're eating smaller meals, then maybe there's, again, less stuff in your intestines, and so it's putting on less pressure. Maybe it's postural. And so a lot of people, I've heard say, have an anterior pelvic tilt, which means that a lot more pressure is coming down to the front of the abdominal wall, and so can result in a hernia. These are the kind of ideas. Another one might be, what's your gut motility like? If you're not pooping very often, you're going to have more internal pressure, and so improving that might reduce the inner pressure, and so your hernia doesn't come out. Again, this is just a way of thinking about the problem. You might have other ways of doing this. Most people, when they first have a hernia, their instinct is just to lie on the couch. They just go, oh, expletive, I've just had a hernia, I'm going to lie down and it stays in. So their instinct is to go here. Okay, this isn't a long-term strategy, but it keeps the hernia in, forward to give you time to think about what on earth you're going to do. At least that's what I did, and I think basically when they get hernia, their instinct is just to literally lie down. So again, gives you a whole list of strategies, some short-term, like lying on the sofa, some longer term, like figuring out your diet and fixing your posture, will also help. The other option is, as I said, there's some threshold at which the hernia occurs. You can tolerate this much pressure, but you can't tolerate any pressure around here. Well, what happens if you can increase that tolerance, your tolerance of pressure, then this chart might look like this. And over time, you'll hopefully keep moving this line out until the amount of pressure required for your hernia to come out becomes so large it's not really relevant. You know, maybe you're not going to try and compete with Eddie Hall, and you're not going to try and deadlift, I don't know how much you can deadlift, 500 kilograms. Sure, the hernia will come out if you're trying to deadlift 500 kilograms, but you don't want to, and you have no intention of it, so it's kind of not relevant. And so you can happily exist under the threshold, doing all the activities you want to do, running, jumping, swimming, I don't know what else, whatever you want, and the hernia never comes out, and so you don't care, and so you're like me and you tell people I've cured my hernia. Sure, maybe I have a hernia, I deadlift 500 kilograms, but I don't want to, so it doesn't matter. Okay, how do I increase this capacity? The most immediate way, and I've done a video on this, is to create some balancing pressure on the other side. If you can imagine, your intestines are pushing out, but if you've got an external force, maybe that will increase, you know, if the pressure of your intestines goes up slightly, they kind of balance out. And so this gives you ideas like having a truss, which, as I mentioned, I have another video on this. Or, and this was kind of a bit of a lifesaver for me, in the sense that when I had the hernia, I was super frustrated. I used to be fairly active, working out, and then suddenly I couldn't really do anything. You know, if I did anything vaguely sporty, my hernia would come out. And so another way we can increase the external pressure, like the truss, you always have an atmospheric pressure. So there's always like air pushing against you, even though we can't really sense it. If you go in the water, that increases, so water has a greater atmosphere, it's not atmospheric, but there's a water pressure that moves this line ever so slightly to the right, that means you can exercise again. I could go swimming. I mean, maybe being horizontal reduces the pressure as well, but I could go swimming, I could actually get a decent workout in by jumping in the pool. And so this, for me, stopped me kind of going a bit crazy while I was trying to heal the hernia, because it gave me this freedom to work out that maybe I wouldn't have had otherwise. Okay, so these are shorter term strategies. Another short term strategy, okay, maybe, really simple thing. I go to the supermarket and I want to buy something in the supermarket, and there's a queue, and I'm standing in the queue and the hernia comes out. How do I change this game? When I'm queuing, stand on one leg. This might sound super stupid, but if your hernia is not going to come out doing this, or ask your friend, ask them to stand on two legs and just poke into the abdominal region. How much tension is there? And then stand on one leg and do it. And suddenly there'll be a little bit more tension in the muscles. And so with a greater tension in your abdominal structure, for me, I found that I could tolerate a greater pressure. As I mentioned, literally just standing in a supermarket queue, I could stand there, put weight on one leg, and I knew it wasn't going to come out. Maybe I could add some extra tension by drawing my belly button in towards my spine, and I knew I could stand there pretty much all day. And so, these little strategies can help keep the hernia in and help you over time heal it. Longer term, as I said, you want stronger tissues. This is really the long-term game, is strengthening the tissues. So what happens when we reduce the size of this inguinal canal? Imagine if the inguinal canal's small, like narrower, tighter, the amount of pressure to breach it is going to be higher. And so how do you strengthen this inguinal canal and make the tissues there stronger? I'll do this in other videos, but it's things like training your internal and external obliques, training your transverse abdominis. So do look into that. Also, obviously, strengthen the tissues. It comes to things like diet, maybe some supplementation. An obvious one is something like vitamin C helps you lay down collagen. So that's going to strengthen the tissues there. So, yeah, for example, vitamin C. Anyway, hopefully this gives you a framework, understanding what you need to do to keep your hernia in, and over time increase your capacity, internal pressure, such that you can live life the way you want to. Yeah, I don't think I have anything more to say, at least until another video. If you have any questions, do let me know down in the comments. And as always, thank you for watching.